Shame. Shame couldn't be more practically explained as embarrassment. The feeling of being embarrassed. If a little kid feels embarrassed and they hide their face from the world, that act of hiding from the world is because I'm embarrassed of what has happened. I'm embarrassed of what I've done. And when we're young and we're developing, being given feedback and being healthily disciplined is a teaching tool. It's how kids learn what is and isn't appropriate within social norms of society. So if there's a kid that shits in his hand and like a monkey throws it at someone's face and he doesn't get told that that's not okay, then he hasn't been given the embarrassment or healthy level of shame. That's the healthy utility of shame. When someone does something that isn't acceptable within what we decide as a culture isn't acceptable, then that's the opportunity for shame to be functional, practical, and supportive. The problem is that most people go through life and at a young age actually don't learn that certain behaviors can warrant embarrassment, healthy embarrassment or shame, but learned that they as a person, not the behaviors they've done, but they as a person are embarrassing or shameful, and they adopt an identity of being shame. It's not a conscious thing, but it's a body experience, a bodily and a mental experience. And that is called toxic shame. A really great book to go deep on shame is a book, I think it's James Bradshaw, but the book's called Healing the Shame That Binds You. Healing the Shame That Binds You. It's a powerful book. I read it a long time ago and I reread it still a long time ago, but it's been on my shelf for a long time. And the principles that underpin it, very, very interesting. And so essentially, shame as an emotion is an experience when there's judgment present. And so what happens is people that are not seen, heard, or celebrated for who they are, or undergo intense trauma in childhood, which most of society go through, can cultivate this belief system and identity that they themselves are shameful. And they have a shame identity. That is toxic shame, not healthy shame of redirecting behavior, but actually believing that there's something wrong with me. And this usually happens through traumatic experiences. So if someone gets yelled at a lot when they're a kid and there's emotional abuse or neglect in that form, that can cause toxic shame. What have I done to be worthy of this? There's obviously something wrong with me. If someone has something really intense happen to them, like they get a really bad disability, or they have some sexual abuse, or they get physically disciplined and have some physical abuse, oftentimes that person through that trauma will cultivate the feeling of, well, there's something wrong with me. And when I say feeling of, that's because what happens is that person then has a nervous system experience of feeling like they're in fight or flight as a steady state. It's not a conscious thing, but they are worried in nature because they feel like there's inherently something wrong with them. And that plagues their physical experience of life. Their body just feels stressed and tight, and they feel anxious as a very common experience, as a consistent experience of their life, because they think there's something wrong with them. And if someone feels like something's wrong with them, that goes against what we as a human species need to feel safe. Because the thing that creates safeties for us as humans is other people. It's one of the biggest aspects that creates a sense of safety. As mammals are any animal species that rely on a group of fellow animals to be safe and protected. So schools of fish. Any animal that relies on a group for protection is a mammal and has aspects of the way that they show up to life that programs them to fit in, and as humans, the way that we do that is by needing to know that we belong. And so when someone believes that there's something wrong with them, that safety that comes from feeling a sense of belonging, I belong in this tribe. Because if we're living in nature, if we're living in the wild, we need the tribe to survive. We physically need it. We need people to build things. We need people to gather things. We need people to hunt things. We need multiple people to protect from certain animals. And it's the numbers that creates the safety. And so that's different to a lot of other species. Like tigers aren't pack animals. Tigers are solitary creatures, so they can survive by themselves. We aren't. We need people. And so if our sense of belonging is threatened because we believe there's something wrong with us inherently, then we walk around not feeling safe, aka feeling hypervigilant, aka our nervous system being dysregulated in our sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight. And that's why shame is a problem, because our experience of life is massively threatened. Now, I'm going to be hitting off a lot of pieces around shame and flowing through lots of different theory and important things to consider with it. But the way that we can think about someone who has shame is if someone feels like not only their behavior that they did was embarrassing, but they are embarrassing, then those people walk around feeling like there is inherently something wrong with them. And that means that they are literally as a baseline. And how do I know this? I grew up with toxic shame. There's a lot of abuse in the house that I grew up in, a lot of yelling, a lot of drug abuse, a lot of mental health issues with both of my parents, abandonment issues, emotional neglect, emotional abuse. There was a lot of things that happened to me that had me grow up feeling what I'm about to stress, which is the symptom or the way that you can identify toxic shame, which is hidden. It's hidden. It's not obvious. People don't walk around going, this is what's happening to me. I've got toxic shame. I think there's something wrong with me. It's hidden away. Because the way to identify it is that someone inherently feels less than human. Someone has toxic shame, which if you're listening to this, there's a chance you do, because most people that, in my experience, that have been drawn to personal development, spiritual development, the emotional healing work, the personal development world, are called into this space to heal because they feel that there is something inherently wrong with them and they're always trying to change themselves. And so usually, like just from my vast experience of coaching thousands of people and facilitating thousands of people, it's that they get into this space, they believe there's something wrong with them. And they believe that they are less than human. And if someone believes that they're less than human, usually what they do is, because they're feeling worse than, is that the only way to seek relief from that, well, there's two ways, but one of the main ways is I either accept that there's something wrong with me, which is very painful, because again, it means accepting that one is not safe. Because if there is something wrong with them and they don't belong, then they're not protected by other people because there's something wrong with them. That's why we're so wired to fit in. That's why we're so wired to be liked. That's why status and social media play on our psychology so hard. Because if we are disliked or judged or rejected, then we may be abandoned. And if we get exiled from the tribe, from our psychology's perspective, because our brain was designed to live in the wild, that's how it developed, and that's the way it's still wired. We're in a completely different setting in modern society to the way we were designed to be in. If we are going to get judged, rejected, then our brain stimulates all this stress response, all this fear, all this, oh my gosh, my survival's under threat because I need to be liked. And if I get exiled from the tribe, which is what our brain's thinking is going to happen, even though we're not living in tribes, but our brain thinks we are, and our brain thinks if we get exiled from the tribe, we're not liked, we get rejected, we get abandoned, we get exiled from the tribe, that means death in the wild, because we need people for survival. We need other people for safety. That explains why we pretty much do everything as a species. It's to try to be liked. It's to try to be loved. It's to try to fit in.